All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another Unified Platform webinar here at Avid. Today, we are going to be talking about dual operator workflow. So it's going to be a pretty cool little session here. I hope you guys are into this. This is kind of a new thing, certainly a new thing for us, and I want to show you all about it. So just a reminder, we are going to have a Q&A section at the end. So if you want to ask questions and get them answered, please use the Q&A button, not the chat area there. Use the Q&A button, submit your questions. I've got a bunch of guys in the background here to answer your questions during the webinar. And at the end, we'll pull a few questions that we think might be applicable to the larger crowd of people, and we'll answer those live. So feel free to do that. Okay, so with that said, let's get going here. As I said, this is going to be a webinar on dual operator workflows. Now, as always, we're always promoting and trying to build with the unified platform concept in mind. And of course, remember, this is all about, all things work together. And specifically when we do software upgrades, it upgrades all the systems at the same time. Now, in fairness here, this is going to be our first little departure from this with regard to the control surfaces. And really, it has as much to do with anything as the size of these surfaces. If you think about having two people operate a console, well, that becomes, just logistically challenging if it's 16 faders total. So it really wouldn't apply down there in that smaller console. But the other thing that comes along with it is that you need to have channel touch screens for both operators, dedicated to both operators. So the support for this dual operator workflow kind of stops at 24D because you can have dedicated channel touchscreens for those users. But short of that, everything we're going to talk about today applies to all the systems, all the engines, et cetera. It's going to go across the board. Okay. All right. So here's, I just tried to put together a small list of targeted kind of workflows for this dual operator thing. And I think, honestly, the first place I would start here is to say to you, just because it's called dual operator, don't kind of fall into the trap of thinking you have to have two people to operate this. As you'll see as I go through these workflows here, there are plenty of instances of a single user taking full advantage of dual operator. And I will absolutely confess to you, once I kind of got my head around this and started using it, I immediately started thinking, I'm never going to go out on tour again without using dual operator. I mean, it's just a beautiful way to segment the console into a couple of different workflows and have it be really powerful in terms of immediate control and getting to things quickly. So I'm going to hopefully give you some real examples of that today. But let's kind of go down through the list here. This is kind of what drove us to build this thing into the consoles. So certainly you have situations in houses of worship where you're going to have a music mix going on. But of course, you also have a lot of other activities in those services, in those events, none the least of which are a pastor speaking. You might have drama, multiple drama mics. You might even have a second person mixing just the drama. And then also production mixing concepts as well, where you might have video playbacks, all kinds of other elements that run in and around that music mix. So, dual operator is a great way, whether you have one or two people doing it, to be able to segment those two things in the console and keep very clean and clear track of both of those workflows. The theater music mixer, the dialogue mixer. Honestly, this is the workflow that probably drove us to design this as much as anything. Working with Garrett and the guys in London on all their theater productions, they have a situation where if they're doing musicals, they have one person mixing the music, but they have another person that is strictly mixing the dialogue, meaning they have VCAs or input faders where every line something is coming up and down on the show, and then we might run to a piece of music. Those two things might run concurrently. So, having the console segmented into two areas that both of those things can be handled very elegantly was really important to them. So, it kind of drove our thinking on this, and then we've kind of expanded on it. You see a similar kind of workflow in award shows or corporate shows, especially where there's a music element involved, where you might have a music mixer. And this would definitely be true on award shows where you might have music mixers involved, and then you also have a production mixer who is handling all the introductions and all of the videotape rolls, all the intros, all the award ceremony, and then another person mixing music. And more often than not, on these big productions, that's two people, two completely separate mixers. But you could combine those two workflows with dual operator into one console if you needed to do it. I've certainly done shows of that scale where I've been asked to do both jobs, and I think about what I went through on those versus what I would go through on dual operator, and it's no contest. I would do dual operator there in a heartbeat. Another workflow where you could take advantage of this is monitor mixing, where you might see, monitor mixers are try to do this kind of thing all the time, where you might see a monitor mixer who use the left-right bus for the star mix and then mix all the other band members off the auxes. Well, in dual operator, you could actually break those two things apart and have one half of the console dedicated to the star mix, the other half of the console dedicated to navigating and mixing the band, where one person could keep those two workflows very separate and work really well. Probably another one, well, no probablys about it. One of them that would definitely be served by this is one of the more complex workflows that we do as live sounds engineers, where you are mixing front of house and monitors from the same console. I mean, you literally have two completely different workflows going on there. Well, dual operator is a great way to handle this, where you can segment, you're basically taking one half of the console and making it the monitor console, and the other half and making it the front of house console. And that is going to be the workflow I'm going to demonstrate to you today and show you that one to give you a sense of what you do with it. And then, of course, front of house mixing, where you can have a piece of half of the console that is dedicated to front of house mixing, and the other half of the console that is really dedicated to systems management, where you can have all your matrices, all your outputs. Somebody could go over there and make adjustments to it without any possibility really of interrupting what you're doing. So that's also another really powerful one. And I'll just say for me, this is going to sound convenient to say this, but I think the next time I'm out on tour, I will be with a 48D, and I will be doing that kind of dual operator workflow on it. No question about it. It just works so great to be able to do that. So that's my endorsement of it. All right, let's take a look at what we're going to do today. So I'm going to launch you off here with how to set up dual operator mode in standalone software. That's the first place we're going to stop, and you can designate dual operator as standalone, and and actually do the programming on it and get it ready for standalone as it comes in on the console. Then I'm going to take an actual console, or show you how to take an actual console and put it into dual operator and establish the right and left zones. We're going to build some layouts for both the left and the right zone. We'll talk about some strategies how to do that, kind of best practices for doing that. We are also going to build in some custom navigation capability with the function pad app, the iPad app. And I'll just tell you right now, once you get your head around that iPad app and what it can do in dual workflow, man, game over. It is so great. You are just not going to believe how quickly you can do some things here on this console with it. And then, of course, as I said, I'll bring up an actual show file that's been segmented into dual operator, kind of a front of house and monitor workflow, and we'll kind of go through the possibilities there, and that'll wrap us up. Okay? All right, so here we go. So this is in standalone right now. What you're looking at is actual standalone software. And the way you would do this, remember, you only have 3 console choices for dual operator. So once you get your console chosen and connected here, you can just simply right-click on the console itself. And then once you do that, you're going to get a drop-down menu, and you'll notice that there's some additional choices in the drop-down menu. One, to be able to enable or disable dual operator mode. And it's probably worth pointing out right now that you can go in and out of dual operator, single operator, whenever you want. It doesn't require a console restart, anything like that. You can just bounce in and out of it as you might need to do it. And then, of course, for the 48D, you're going to pick how big your right zone is going to be. You have a choice of either 1 or 2 modules, okay? And we'll talk about the rules for kind of doing this as we go forward here. So that's the way you do that in standalone. Once you're done there, then you can go and start building your layouts. And this is probably the first opportunity to say this. Both users have access to all of the layouts, right? So as you're building layouts, depending on how you're going to use them, you might want to keep in mind the primary operator and the secondary operator. But the 48 layouts and the 48 channels in the layout are common to both users, to both right and left users. So just stick with me there, and I'll give you some strategies on how to best manage that, okay? It's also true for snapshots, meaning as I recall a snapshot, it is going to recall the layout if I have the right layout chosen. If it's going to recall the layout for both users. Okay, so again, you kind of need to be strategic when you're building your layouts that are going to be recalled by snapshot. But once you get your head around it, it's pretty easy. You'll figure out how to do it. Right? Okay, let's talk about how to build. Let's see if I can get this off there. There we go. Or how to take the console in and out of dual operator mode. All right, so you do this in the universe view. This is certainly a place to do it. And it's done with the little gear icon down in the lower right-hand corner. If you touch on this icon, it's going to take you to the general area or the control surface configuration. And once you're there, you're going to check the box for dual operator mode, right? And from that point on, you're in dual operator. As I mentioned, you can come in and out as you need, but you can do that. And you'll notice that once you select dual operator mode, it automatically separates the console into two halves. Now, this is kind of where you have to understand one of the rules, right? And one of the rules of dual operator is the channels that are on the right are always going to be right of the MLM. You cannot have right side operator channels left or centered of the MLM, that master live module in the center. Okay? All right, so once you get that chosen, you can take this slider and choose whether you want it to be 8 or 16 modules, or 8 or 16 channels of module on the right-hand side for the right-hand user. All right, so let's talk about some of the basic rules of dual operator. For fader zones, as you just saw, only on the 48D, the left zone can be either 40 or 32 faders wide, meaning from, processing channel 1 all the way across to the end of the MLM. For the 32D, the right side user will always only be 8 faders, and the same for the 24D. It will always be 8 faders on the right. Here's the cool part, though. This is where it gets really fun. Banking, nudging, sends on faders, spill, channel bank safe, these are all independently available in both zones. That's where the power really comes in to dual operator, where you can navigate and operate independently on those sides. Let's talk about navigation. So navigation, banking, navigation modes on the left side can be controlled using the MLM switches, which we'll talk about here in a second, and the left bank of soft keys or events. Either side can be controlled with events as well. Banking and navigation modes for the right zone can be controlled using events as well. And they are done from the right bank of dual operator soft keys, which we're going to see next here. And then finally, the events in event triggers and actions menus have submenus for the left and right zone, which you'll see as we build an event here going forward. Okay, so those are the basic rules of dual operator, but it's pretty great. All right, so let's take a look at the console itself and see how it segments out. So this would be zone 1, as you saw in the setup. This would be our left-hand zone, and this would, and then the right-hand zone would be zone 2. The left-hand guy is kind of the administrator for the rest of the situation. Like his area is going to be in charge of building layouts, kind of recalling snapshots, etc. Remember, it's not a discrete snapshot system. The snapshot system affects both sides of the console. All right. You do have zone-specific banking and navigation here, just like it always is for that left-hand user. But you're going to have a right-hand zone-specific banking and navigation. For the right-hand user here, we're going to take advantage of that right TFT and build that same kind of capability into it. So here's kind of what it looks like. If we were to zoom in on that, this is how it comes up once you're in dual operator, which looks normal with the exception of this one new switch down here, which is the dual operator switch. All right, once we switch into that dual operator, it's going to change that right-hand TFT screen to a little different view. All right, so here's your left-hand view and your right-hand view, and you'll notice it's a different kind of set of switches and laid out the same, but it's the same functionally as that left-hand TFT. So if you take a look at, our choice of layouts, VCAs, inputs, and outputs, well, those same choices are available on the right-hand TFT now for the right-hand user, the right-side user. The only thing that is not available to the right-side user is venue mode. Right, where you have a combination of inputs and outputs available to you, where all of those 4 switches up in the left-hand corner there are blank or dark, then you're in venue mode for that left-hand user. That would not exist on the right side, right? Right-hand user would not have a quote-unquote venue mode. Now, he could build one into custom layouts if he wants to do that, but it wouldn't come standard. Next part is the inputs navigation. As you can kind of see, we both have, both right and left user have inputs navigation here, and it's segmented depending on the amount of faders that they have available to them. So you can see that the banks lay out a specific way depending on how much faders are available to each user. And then finally, we have the ability to nudge independently for each user. So if you have a layout up, remember, as I said, all 48 faders in a layout are available to both users. So even though that right side user only has 16 faders up, well, he's still got access to 48 channels of layout. So using banking, he can go address any of those other channels in the layout as needed as well. Okay, hope that's making sense to you guys. All right, so let's see, where do we go from here? Yes, so what also comes along with that is zone-specific selection and editing, and this would be expected given that we do local selection on S6L, where we have multiple selections capable on the console. Well, of course, we would have zone-specific selection and editing for the left guy as well as the right guy. They can make selections even on the same channel and work on it. Now, it's not that they're working on, well, they are working on the channel independently, but it is one channel, right? It's not like you have a separate version of the same channel there. All right. The other thing that comes with it, and this is where our solo system actually becomes very handy, especially for that kind of front of house and monitor mixing workflow, where you could set up the left-hand side of the console to be addressed with the left-hand control room output, or the headphone output, I should say, and define inputs to be addressed that are soloed directly to that output, and zone 1 specific outputs addressed specifically to that output, and be able to solo them independently from the right-hand user. He could actually set up his own solo system here. He could be on the B solo per se, and then have his own inputs be able to be soloed there. Maybe you would have the inputs be common between the left and the right-hand user, but yet their outputs that they're dealing with be independent. So if they soloed outputs, they could do that independently over there. So if you're mixing monitors on the right-hand side, especially if you have a second person over there mixing monitors, they're going to want to be doing a lot of listening that you might not want to be doing on the left-hand side. So our solo system actually becomes very handy and very meaningful part of this workflow. Okay. All right, so we're going to move right into some workflow examples here. So I'll tell you what, give me just a second. I'm going to get my cameras turned on here. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second here. So here's the overhead view of the console. And I think for this purpose, I'll give you we'll go into a zoomed in version of that. Get this going here. Okay, so I'm in dual operator mode here. I've already gone and switched over. I've pressed on the little switch to engage this TFT into dual operator mode. Now, I want to make it clear, all of your mute groups, all of your events are all still available even when you go to this dual operator mode. It's just you have to back up to do it. You have to go back to the home page to get it. All right, so if I go to home and now I select dual operator, I get that dual operator mode here. So if you just watch along the console, the breakpoint is right here. So this is one user, this is the second user, and we are both looking at inputs right now. So left guy's looking at inputs, and right guy is looking at inputs. And we can bank them and move around independently here, right, of each other, right? So over here, I'm looking at input banks, etc. So the same thing would apply, obviously, for all of the other elements of it. So if I go to VCAs here, over here, I could go to groups maybe, or outputs. Maybe I go to groups over here. So I'm looking at groups here. I'm looking at a different set of outputs here. Maybe I even go to outputs over here. Actually, I was looking at VCAs here. So now I'm looking at outputs and can select any one of the output sets and do the same thing on the right. So they're operating really very independently each other. Even though the channels are the same, your access to them is completely segmented, right? And the same applies for layouts, right? So if I go to layouts, now I have custom built layouts available for both sides. And this is where it can get really, really fun. So as I said, layouts are common to all, both right-hand and left-hand user, but you have the ability to call them up independently, right? So let's leave snapshot out of the picture just for now. Let's just talk about the independent layouts. So all of the layouts are showing up here that are available of the 48 layouts, right? So I can definitely choose my drums over here and choose my bass. Over here, I can go on to a different set of layouts if I want to do it all the way down into the next banks where I'm selecting layouts over here that are specific to what I want to do over there, right? So the part that you need to get your head around right away is that both the left-hand and the right-hand user are using the same layouts. They both have access to it all. So remember, the nudge applies here. So if I recall, let's recall the drums layout in both. Back here. Remember, I can nudge independently on either one. So if I want to nudge this left-hand side, I can do it with the regular nudge. I can do it by 8 if I want to do it, and nudge and get to other channels, because remember, I only have 32 channels available to me here visibly, but there might actually be 48 channels in this layout. Same thing applies for that right-hand user, right? So if I'm over here, remember, I can nudge him as well and get to inputs within the 48-bit fader layout, right? Okay, is that making sense to everybody? I hope it is. All right, so let's talk about snapshot layers here for a second now, because this will require a little bit of strategy on your part. So if we're going to have a snapshot recall a layout where one snapshot recall is going to recall the layout for both users, essentially, then we want to be a little strategic in how we build our layouts. And again, this is where you're going to have the A user, the left-hand user, probably be the administrator for this, where you're going to build layouts that come up in that snapshot that are going to be meaningful to this guy on the right, right? So that would mean I would probably want to keep it, let's use the example of front of house and monitors here. If I'm for the front of house mix, I'm going to try to keep what I need in that given song inside 32 inputs, right? And make the last 16 faders of that layout addressable to the monitor guy. So then when I recall it, his 16 come up here, my 32 come up here. That's the way you kind of want it to have happen for these snapshots, because remember, I'm going to recall one and it's going to be common for both guys. Now, this guy can leave out of it anytime he wants. He could also nudge and get to any of the faders that he needed to get to in that layout. If he wanted to get to some of the faders that are on the left-hand side, it's just a matter of nudging and getting to them, right? So works really, really cool. All right, so let's talk about maybe building a layout here. Let's see what that looks like, and this will just kind of drive home the concept that the layouts are common to each other. So I'm just going to go to an empty layout here, and I'm going to do it on both of them so you can kind of see this happen. Hopefully you can see enough of this in the overhead here. Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to go to Layout Assign. So we're in Layout Assign here. And I'm going to get back over here. There we go. So you can kind of see it off here in the left-hand corner. This is the target for the first input, right? I'll just make sure I've got myself in order here. Yeah, okay, here we go. All right, so as you can see, the target is in the left-hand user, right? He is going to decide what goes where in the layout. And over here, I'm still in dual operator mode, so this is now channel 1. This is the equivalent channel over here, right? So you'll notice as I start to assign to the layout, it's actually doing both sides at the same time, right? So that's where you want to get to the point where you get to this position in it. You want to start putting in channels that are relevant to the right side user for the snapshot, okay? I mean, you may get in a situation where snapshot is not even recalling for the right-hand side. He's just working off of manually recalled layouts, right? But if you're going to do it in snapshot, then you got to remember that both of them are common, right? And if you'll notice, I think you can probably see it up here. anytime I have the number one layout selected, remember that is my snapshot layout. That is layouts that are snapshotted are going to arrive there. I can get there independently on both of these. So here's layout one over here. So if I'm sitting with both TFTs in layout one, that means the snapshot is going to arrive on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the desk, right? Okay. All right. Let me get back out of this a little bit. Cancel out of this. Okay, so let's talk about maybe safes here for just a second. So remember, we have the ability to bank safe on S6L, meaning if I put something in safe, those channels are going to stay there regardless of where I navigate to. It's kind of a lock for a channel. Well, that works independently on both sides of the console as well in dual operators. So let's say, for instance, maybe this is my VCAs that I'm mixing with in front of house. I'm going to safe those up. And maybe over here, maybe on my right side, these are all my aux masters. All these purple ones are my aux masters for my ears, right? Maybe it's ear mixes, wedge mixes, whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and safe those up, so that no matter what I navigate to, I always have those ear mix masters there, so that I could spill them and get to them, maybe see them, whatever I want to do, be able to monitor that output. So left-hand guy is here. I go to inputs, I go to VCAs, I go to different layouts. It doesn't matter. These channels stay right on the top layer for me to be able to keep mixing while I'm going to address other channels. Exactly the same thing applies over here, right? So I've got my aux masters, my ear masters in safe here, and I'm just going to go and look at other layouts here. Maybe now this is my drums over here, etc., right? And where this gets really powerful in digital consoles, especially for dual operator, is if you're mixing front of house and monitors. It's very common in that situation to create duplicate or even triplicate channels sometimes. Maybe you have a vocal. Okay, this is going to be my vocal channel for the front of house. Well, I'm going to patch that preamp into a separate processing channel, and that is going to be the vocal channel for the ears, right? And maybe you label them differently or whatever. That's kind of what I got going on here. Oops. Get back over here. Here. Oops, sorry. So, in this particular situation, I've got a lead vocal channel, but I've also got a duplicate channel for the monitors, right? And that channel comes up as my lead vocal over here. These are all the different vocal channels that are available to my monitor mix. So obviously, if I go and work on equalization here, it's not affecting front of house at all. I can take and send it up here. It just kind of keeps it all over here in one area. So then you can really kind of create a true split console, one that is mixing front of house, one that is mixing monitors. I mean, if it fits into your channel count, you could have an entire duplicate, right? I mean, let's face it, if you were sitting in 64 channels of front of house mix, you could just duplicate that 64 channels into a monitor console and navigate it entirely over here, right? So it would be very easy to do that. And if I was mixing front of house and monitors and it fit inside the channel count, I would definitely do that without question. All right, let's jump into, let's see, what should we do next? Let's jump into using events to do things, because this is where the fun really begins here. Let me get back to a simple state here. That's typical. All right, so front of house mix, monitor mix. So one of the things you can do, matter of fact, let me go here. It's just, I'll give you maybe an example of this. There we go. So I'm going to take you to the control area here, and we'll look at some of these events that I've built, and then I'll show you how to get to them. So I've kind of broken it down in my events list, as you can see here, where I have monitor functions, right, and front of house functions. Whoops, sorry, I think it's up here. Yeah, front of house functions. So I've kind of broken them apart a little bit so that I can get to them, and I'll show you why I did that for the iPad app here in just a second. So let me do this here. There we go. All right, so as you can see here, one of the things that that we might want to do for a monitor situation, if we're doing front of house and monitors, is actually be able to spill and get to uh, auxiliaries to work on those mixes very quickly, right? We want to be able to have one button be able to go and address these auxes or whatever we want to do here. So so notice I've got a set of ear mixes and a couple of speaker mixes here. So ears 1 through 6, side fills, and drum fill are set up where I can spill them using function keys, right? And it's a combination of spill and sends on faders. So if I go down here, notice in the right-hand side here, it says right zone sends on faders, ears, right zone spill, and then flash the function switch. So if we were gonna just edit this, take you to the menu so you can see it here. We go down to modes, and notice that we have a right and a left zone to choose from. Now, obviously, we're talking about front of house and monitors here and trying to segment those two things. But as you're going to see here, given that you have this right zone available to you, you can do all kinds of really cool stuff, even as a single operator here. So let's stick on monitors for just a second, though. And I'm going to go back now to our camera. All right. So let's see. Let me get to this view. There we go. Yeah. Now, so you can kind of see here, I've got an iPad app that has all the function switches built on it. This is our function pad app. And I've got it segmented into 2 tabs here. So my first tab, this is all front of house work that I might want to do. And the second one is all monitor work, right? And I haven't built the solos into this. You could certainly build the capability of solo into this as well. It's purely navigation right now. But let's say I'm mixing along in front of house, and maybe one of the ear mixes says, hey, I need an adjustment. Well, I just go to the iPad app and touch on the ear mix, and it's automatically in sends on faders over here now. These are the actual send levels. This is the actual mix that is in that auxiliary, right? So I come back out of it, maybe go to another mix. That's another mix now. Maybe I go to my side fill mix. Here's my side fill mix. And if I ever want to just get back in terms of layout, I can always just go, I can always go back to my snapshot layout here. So if I do this, that puts me back in the snapshot layout now, right? Same thing, I could actually navigate over here to my layouts if I want to set up specific layouts just for me. Maybe what I do is I'll set up the last 16 faders of layouts 25 through 48 as purely my layouts. Well, I can set those up to navigate here so that I don't have to go back to the function switches here. I can stay in this mode as opposed to going to home and navigating to the function switch to get to it, right? I can go back and stay in this mode and do it purely from the iPad. So in that situation, maybe I'm looking at my drums now. Now I'm looking at my vocal layout. And then, of course, then I can get back to sends on faders and mix over here as well. So it's just super clean and super powerful to do it this way. Now, let's think about it from a front of house perspective, right? Or actually, before I do that, let's talk about spills first. Obviously, I'm doing spills with events here, but of course, we could do that with a normal spill as well. If you see me, these are my ear mixes over here. If I double tap the attention, I've got the spill of that aux here now, right? I've spilled an aux, and check out what's happening here. I have all the banks of the inputs that are on in that aux, so I can navigate through them as well, right? Come out of the spill, and I'm right back where I was. Obviously, the same thing applies over here. I can spill over here and have spills take place here as well, right? And it's going to take place on the left-hand side. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it was leading me to the next point. Obviously, as the left-hand user, if I spill here, it's going to spill everything to the left-hand side of the console. It's going to bring it down into the left-hand side of the console, right? So if I spill this, that shows up down here, right? Same thing over here. If I spill an aux here, it's going to spill starting here. Remember, this is the same point, essentially, in reference to the layouts. But what you can do, given that you have this right side capability now, is you can actually create right side spills that are for your front of house mix, right? So for instance, I'm so in love with this concept right now. If I'm doing an actual spill, an actual group or aux spill, I just go ahead and do it from this side and let it happen over here, right? Usually it's group spills and VCA spills over here. But if I want to get within an aux and actually mix in an aux, maybe it's my subwoofer drive or an effects drive, etc., I'm spilling all of that over here now, right? So I've got one set up over here where it's like, okay, well, let me change the level of things that are in my lead vocal reverb. Well, I touch that. This is the channels that are in that reverb now. How about my subwoofer matrix? Well, this is my subwoofer matrix now, and I can adjust the levels spilled. It's just the levels within the subs now. Or how about, whatever you want it to be. Maybe this is my drum room. These are the channels that are going into my drum room. And it just kind of keeps those two worlds separate, and mentally it's really clean to do it. Now, obviously, if you have another person standing here doing that, you might not want to do it that way. But strictly as, even if you didn't think dual, quote unquote, dual operator, you're thinking single operator, being able to have functionality like that happening here as well as over here and keeping them separate, man, it is super, super powerful, super clean to be able to do it that way. All right, so that's a great example of this. I think it's as good an example as we can do in this situation. I could pull up lots of other show files if you want, but I think we'd just be regurgitating the same thing. And that's kind of why I chose that front of house and monitor workflow to be able to show this. So let's see here. I think that's probably just about it. Actually, maybe I'll give you one hack here. I was sharing this with one of our other guys the other day. For you guys that have used the function pad, I'm gonna give you a pretty cool little hack here. Let's see, how do I do this? Matter of fact, do this. This is no charge, by the way, for this. So if you guys have used the iPad app in the past, one of the kind of challenges with it is that none of the function switches show up until you program them, and then they kind of come up in the order that you use the function switches. So I'm going to, hang on, let me give you an example of what we have happen, and then I'll kind of show you how to deal with it. Stand by for me here. Let's go here. And then we'll start taking some questions here. Okay, so as I said, in the normal operation for this, when you're doing the iPad app, as you make function switch functionality on it, it'll start populating this in order. So right now, even though this is in the number 1 slot, it's actually function switch 3 that is responsible for safe bypass. This one here, I don't even know what function switch this is. It's probably 9 or 10 or something like that, but it does it in order. And you don't really have a way right now to be able to drag and drop these into an order here. So the hack I've come up with is putting placeholders in place until you actually make a function key. So let me get to, let me go to here for a second. Let's see if I can get this up. Oops. Go to venue. Come on, venue. I need to see you. There we go. So what I've done is actually go in and make a bunch of events here. And I just call this one F1, and it just says function 1 pressed, and there's no action associated with it. Okay? And you just make an entire list of these for as far out as you want to go. I went to function 40 because that was 2 tabs of iPad, right? So if we go up and now make all of these active, let's see, you'll see what happens on the iPad. And now we'll go back here. So now notice on the iPad, I have placeholders for all the function keys, right? So it says F1, F2, F3 is being used, F4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This was 11, 12, 13, right? And the coolest thing about how this works is you can just have all those placeholders in place sitting there, and you know what function keys are available to you. And as soon as you go program one in the list above the placeholder, it'll supersede the placeholder and put it in on your iPad, right? So here you are, where you can kind of navigate this and put it in an order that you want. So if we wanted to kind of slide all this stuff around, you could just literally go up into the control area, events, and disable this placeholder, and the whole thing would shift left 1. Disable F2, and it would shift more up. But I've got it set up. I kind of took the point of doing this where I just said, okay, well, F1 through 20 are going to be front of house function keys. F21 through 40 are going to be monitor function keys, right? So it's a nice little hack. It's easy, and you can totally take advantage of the ability to import events now, where you just import those placeholders into any show file you want, and your iPad app will come up like this, right? I would strongly encourage you, if you're contemplating these types of workflows, man, get on an iPad app and get this thing going. It works flawlessly and just works so great. So that's my pitch for the old iPad app, function app. It works fantastic. All right, with that, I think that's going to wrap up the discussion of dual operator. We'll move over to a Q&A setting here. Let me get back. Let's see. Back here. And
hey, Robert.
Here. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. So a few questions came in.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, doing great. Let me grab a drink real quick.
No problem. Not many came in, so you must have done an excellent job at explaining everything.
I appreciate that approach there, Chad. That was nice.
First question is, will channels that are bank safed stay the same if the layout changes with recalled snapshot?
Yes. Yes, it will. Once it's safe, it is safe from all activity.
Very cool. Very cool. Next question I have is, how do you create tabs in the function pad app? And I guess you just went over that pretty well. So
I did. It'll automatically create tabs once you reach function key 21.
Yeah.
There are 20 available to each tab. So.
Cool. And last one we have here is, could you show the patch bay if you're doing gain sharing or not?
Yes, I can. And let me switch back over to this. And, kind of want to be careful with your language here. Not to mean that we're cussing or anything, but you got to remember, it's not really gain sharing per se in the strongest of terms. Matter of fact, let me do this and I'll try to get it where we can do this. Just bear with me 1 second. Right. So I'm going to move these two right next to each other. Stand by for me. Okay, so let's say, I did that right here. No, I'm sorry, my mistake. 1 second. Right. Okay, so in this situation, this will probably be the easiest way to show it. So you can see that I have Mike's vocal here, and I'm going to create a monitor version of that. So I call this Mike vocal with an M in parentheses around it, indicating that it's the monitor channel. All right. So obviously both of these got to get the same microphone. So when I go to the patch bay, find this channel here. Oops, there it is. Now I was just building. Why are you there? Hang on 1 second for me. I'm a little confused here. Mike, where are you? Did that in the layout? Is that why I did that? Yes, I did. Sorry. Total operator error there. Bear with me.
No worries. We got a couple more questions coming in, so take your time.
Okay, cool. There we go. This will be right. Oh, sorry, I did it in the layout. All right, so here on the screen, you can see that I have mic vocal is highlighted, and then I have the monitor version of that vocal, right? So in that situation, you're just going to patch this pre, which is plugged into stage rec 1 channel 39 into both channels, right? Now they're going to share common gain. That's the thing that comes with this, and that's why I was saying, be careful of calling this gain sharing. It's not really gain sharing. As I change the gain, it's going to change them for both. So you want to find a gain that is going to work for you in both front of house and monitors, right? You watch, I'll do my own self promotion here. You take a look at my gain structure presentations, you'll see that you can set one gain very effectively for both of those if you follow those gain structure guidelines. All right, so, but that's the only caveat that comes with this, is that the gain is common to both these channels. Everything else is completely separate. Okay. That makes sense to you? I hope that answered your question there.
Yeah, I think that's great. Another question here is, how do we assign the left zones to, say, monitor A bus versus the right zone to the B bus?
Right. So that would be done in buses, I believe. So here's your bus choices: monitor A, monitor bus B, and you would just go to any processing channel and choose which solo it's going to go out of. For instance, this channel is set up to go out of both A and B, or I could change it to be just A or just B, right? And, if you're thinking, well, gosh, do I have to do that on 192 channels? The easiest way to address it globally, if you want to do it, is to do it from the overview page, where you just say, okay, I want all inputs selected to be monitor A. And now once I deselect here, now all of those inputs are going to be monitor A now, right? You follow me there?
Yep, I think that's good.
What else you got for me, champ, man? Keep firing. Keep firing.
Well, there's one here. I'm trying to make a little bit of sense of it. Explain more about layouts with DO. If channel 1 is the same on both zones, it looks like from the example that channels 1 through 16 just map to both zones. And then you're out of channels on the right zone. How do you get different layouts within the snapshot recall?
Well, keep in mind that the snapshot recall is going to address 48 channels that are common to both sides of the console, left and right. And then you're just choosing on the left hand or right hand side which ones of those channels you are going to see. And you can use the nudge to do it. Right, so if you built, as a matter of fact, I think this is actually, I played around with this a little bit. I think this is the better way to program if you're going to program snapshots for both users, and the workflow allows it, is just to go back to single user and do it that way. Because once I'm just going to do it here. So once I go back to single user here, and I go to layouts, I'm programming for, let me get back to the camera here. So I don't know, I know you didn't see me do it, but I actually put the console back in single operator. And I just for me, I'm sure everybody's different here, but just for me, it was more intuitive to program layouts this way that were going to be recalled in snapshot, because once I have the entire console in front of me, and this would apply whether it's in 32, 24, or 48, now I know that whatever I put past this point is going to be, I'm going to dedicate that to the second user, right? Even though that second user has got access to all of these, I know when I recall the snapshot, the left-hand user wants to be focused on these, the right-hand user wants to be focused on these. They both have access to all of it at the same time. But if I lay out the snapshot that way, when we recall the snapshot, it'll come up correctly for this guy on the right. Does that answer your, I hope that answers the question there.
Yeah, I think it does. And just to point out, snapshot libraries or templates would be a great thing to have there, or I should say layout templates.
Sure, sure. And you can remember, you can create 999 of them and keep them in your library and drag them around with you. So you can create all the layouts you would ever want,
Cool. And that is the last of the questions.
Those were good questions. We had a good crowd in here today. That was good. All right. Well, people, with that, I will pull the ripcord here. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you get a chance to work with this workflow. I'm telling you right now, I kind of underestimated it even when I heard what we were working on and we were testing with it and stuff. I until I really got my head around it and started actually doing some mixing with it, I realized how great this was. Man, it is a dream once you get it laid out in terms of navigation. Boy, you can get around on this thing so quick without ever disrupting your mix workflow in any way. It's just awesome. Okay. All right. Well, we'll be on a little bit of a hiatus in August. You probably won't see another venue webinar from us for a few weeks here. Got a couple people on vacation and etc. So look for us to have another webinar for Avid here in a few weeks, and we'll catch you guys on the next Unified Platform webinar. All right, we'll see you guys. Thank you so much for coming.